can see you,
Yes.
Ganesh.
Now everybody will be muted. You can't hear them.
Okay,
Now,
sir.
and I'm
Right,
going to
fine.
mute myself so that the floor is all yours.
Right, sir.
Thank you, Abhijit. Thanks. Let's get going.
So I'm sure Hari sir has already introduced me to you, and also I had sent him a brief introduction. So I won't introduce myself again, if that's okay, sir.
Yes, that should be
Right.
okay. You've been introduced. Yes.
Fine, fine, sir. So I'll start off. I have a slight fluency, and hence I will be slightly slow. Right. So I was the medical officer of the 27th Indian Scientific Expedition to Antarctica, which started on November 2007 and ended in February of 2009. So I will be sharing my experiences with you. To start off, there is a phrase from the book Endeavour, which was authored by Alfred Hansing around 100 years back. In that, he says, in all the world, there is no desolation more complete than the polar night. It's a trip to the ice age. No life, no warmth, no movement. Few men have escaped its effects altogether. Some have even gone mad. These lines hold true even now. Psychological issues are the most important, most prominent health issue over there, much more than any kind of physical ailments. Various adjectives have been ascribed to Antarctica. It is the remotest, coldest, driest, highest, and the windiest continent on Earth. We will just see how it is so. This photograph, which you see, is a typical is the typical landscape of Antarctica. It's a vast, never-ending, featureless expanse of ice, and it continues for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. If you stand in one place, you would not know where you are and where you are supposed to go. The coldest. Well, at our station during the peak winter, the minimum temperature hovered around hovered below minus 30 degrees and sometimes went up to minus 40 degrees as well. But the figure you see here, the minimum wind chill temperature, is the one which is the most important. The wind speed you see here is mentioned as 51 knots, which is equal to 100 kilometers an hour. So such high wind speeds were the norm in Antarctica at our station. And so the minimum wind chill effect went up to minus 80 degrees as well. So effectively, the temperature you felt on your screen was minus 80 degrees. Driest. Now, Antarctica is typically associated with ice. It is. It is almost completely covered with ice. Only 2% of area of Antarctica is exposed land, as you see here. Some areas in Antarctica have not seen any precipitation in the last 2 million years. In spite of that, we have so much of ice there. Highest, the average altitude is around 2,300 meters, and all this height is not on account of any kind of hills or mountains or plateaus or any such things. This is entirely on account of the ice. What you see here is a glacier right adjacent to our station, and it was around 100 meters in height. So, and our station was along the coastline. As you go towards the interior of the continent, the thickness of this ice sheet increases. At places it is even 5,000 meters in thickness. What lies under that ice is still unknown. The windiest. Now, the oceans around Antarctica, also called as the Antarctic Ocean or the Southern Ocean, is one of the windiest in the world. One cyclonic air system follows the other, and each one lasts for up to a week. How severe it can be, I'll just explain it to you in this satellite picture. What you see here is the outline of Africa. I hope everybody is able to see. And what you see here is the outline of Antarctica. And the pin mark here is our station, is the location of our station. The African coast is around 4,000 kilometers away from our station. And you can see that this low pressure area extends right from Africa to Antarctica, which is much more than the extent of India, either from north to south or from east to west. And all this continues all the year round, aggravated in the winters. The wind speeds as well as the frequency of these low pressures, it increases in the winters. Now coming on to Indian stations in Antarctica, we have a few. Now the first Indian station in Antarctica was established in 1984. It was the Dakshin Gangotri station. It was established on an ice shelf. What is an ice shelf? I'll explain it. I'll explain it in a while. So it was constructed on ice, and because it was constructed on ice, as you see in this slide here, it is now going under the ice slowly. And in the next photograph, it is almost completely buried under ice, but it is still habitable. The station here in this picture is still habitable, although it is accessible only through these shafts in the roof. Ultimately, in the year 1991, it had to be completely abandoned, and all the activities were shifted. This is the interior of the station, and all the activities were shifted to the current Indian station, Hatri, which was established in the year 1989. It still is the same. Another Antarctic station, Bharati, has been established in the year 2012. It is an ultra modern Antarctic station, entirely digitized. In fact, all its support systems may be controlled from India. The electricity, the water supply, everything is controlled from India. The advantage of constructing Bharati is that it is on exposed rock, like Hatri is, but it is right adjacent to the coast. So our ship may reach right up to almost up to the station. It makes life a lot easier. We'll talk about that in a while as well. Now coming on to our journey to Antarctica. We started from Goa in the winter of 2007. On board an ice-class ship known as the Emerald Sea. It was a huge ship which could hold 2 helicopters in it, and the entire journey from India to Antarctica, it took us around 25 days, and en route we halted for our supplies in Cape Town. This photograph was taken on the ship exactly at the equator. As we move towards Antarctica, we start encountering ice in the sea. As we go across the Antarctic circle, the amount of ice increases. What you see here is the pack ice, which is essentially fragmented ice, which forms over the surface of the sea. Now, although in the photograph, this ice looks very benign, but each of these pieces of ice may be a couple of meters in thickness, and these pieces of ice may aggregate very quickly if there are windy conditions, or if the temperature decreases very fast, and in the process they can entrap the ship. Hence, in Antarctica or in the Arctic, you need ice class ships, either an ice class or an icebreaker ship. These ships essentially have a strengthened hull, and they do not get damaged in icy conditions. So now some icebergs. How these icebergs come into being, many of you may already know, but I'll elaborate it in a while. So we encountered quite a number of them on the way. This is again pack ice. His photograph was taken at night, late at night, which you can make out by the long shadows which are formed. Once we are beyond the Antarctic circle in the peak summer season, we have 24 hours of sunshine there. So although the sun is always out, at night it comes very close to the horizon. Some more icebergs. Here again, this photograph was taken at night. Now, tabular icebergs. These icebergs are huge pieces of icebergs. Some of them may be even hundreds of kilometers long. How are these formed? They essentially are broken off from the continental ice shelf. Now, ice shelf is continental ice, which covers the entire continent of Antarctica, and this ice cap on Antarctica is slowly shifting out into the sea, and it abuts into the sea. After abutting a certain distance under its weight, it breaks off as a tabular iceberg. As the tabular icebergs goes further away from the Antarctica continent, it starts to melt, and it assumes all those various shapes which you have seen until now. Some more icebergs. These are freshly broken off from the tabular icebergs. Finally, we reach the Antarctica coastline. It looks very similar to the but it is in continuity with the ice shelf. Now here I would also like to add one more adjective to the Antarctica continent. It is the only continent whose area is unstable. It varies the year round, because of the extent of the ice in the sea. During the winters, the ocean around Antarctica, it
Ladies and gentlemen, I think Abhijit will come online soon. I think he has a problem with his connection. So let's just wait for him for a few minutes. I'm sorry about this. He's back, so I think we should be able to start now.
So photographs as we approach the
Ladies and gentlemen, I think Dr. Abhijit Bhatia is suffering from a very poor connection. So while he joins, let me keep you occupied for a short while. And I don't know how many of you know, where in India did the first flight with an aeroplane take place? Where in India? I don't know if you know, it happened in Madras. The first ever flight happened in Madras somewhere around 1905. It was the person who flew the plane was one Jeffrey Giacomo Angelis. De Angelis was had a confectionery shop in Hotel Connemara and was very interested in new technologies, and he got the basic idea of this flight from the Wright brothers, and he put the papers together, the drawings, and had the plane built in Madras. The contract went to Addison and Co, and the plane was built in Pallavaram. He used a regular engine, which was quite powerful, if I'm right, a two-stroke engine. And he put the plane together, and its first ever flight, a test flight, took place in Pallavaram. And After once he knew that it was a successful flight, Giacomo De Angelis bought the, okay, here we are. So let's get started. I'll finish the story later. Abhijit, you're set?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible now.
Okay. So as we approach Antarctica, as we approach our station, we encounter all these lakes. As this Shamachar Oasis is a small piece of land, exposed land, only 2 by 15 square kilometers in area, and it has around 100 lakes, most of them small lakes, which are scattered all over the place. So we are almost at the station, about to land. This is Athri station and the Antarctica airport. It is actually an airstrip. This airstrip is located around 6 to 8 kilometers away from our station, and it is constructed, it is established rather, on a 800-meter high sheet of ice. It essentially has only some temporary structures, and the airport is operational only for 4 months in the summers. It's not easy to maintain the airport. You have to maintain the ice at a certain level, and winters are very hostile in Antarctica. Now, this Illusion 76 aircraft is the only one which lands at our airport, and it has been modified to enhance its abilities to land on ice. So this is the runway over there, and it extends for around 3 kilometers. So you can well imagine the amount of effort that goes to maintain the airport. Now coming on to the scientific activities in Antarctica. What are we doing in Antarctica? Antarctica, all presence in Antarctica as of now has to be entirely scientific or adventure. So our station is a scientific station, and various Indian institutes are involved in activities over there. One of them is the Indian Meteorological Department. Then we have the Indian Institute of Geomagnetism and the National Physical Laboratory. Now these two institutes, they essentially handle the ionospheric studies in Antarctica. The National Geophysical Research Institute, they study earthquakes. Now Antarctica is one place where all earthquakes which happen anywhere in the world, small or big, they can be recorded here. Geological Survey of India are the pioneers of scientific endeavor from India in Antarctica. They started coming right from the very first expedition, which started in 1982 when wintering had not started and India did not even have a station in Antarctica. Then we have the Snow and Avalanche Study Establishment. Then we have some institutes which have undertaken iconological study. The National Hydrographic Office undertakes oceanographic study. These purple streaks which you see on this console on our ship, it marks the route which our ship was taking while accumulating data for NHO. And all these white streaks are the icebergs around our ship. So our hospital, it was a small hospital, but it was very well equipped for the small place that our station was. We had an operation theater as well, and it was very comprehensive. We had equipment to handle almost all kinds of emergencies. Medical stores, Now, some of the wildlife in Antarctica. On the continent, the wildlife is very less. Hardly anything exists over there. The skua is an eagle-like bird which arrives in the summers only. Uh, and then we have the penguins. The penguins at our station are the Adelie penguins, which are very small in height, hardly 1.5 or 2 feet in height, but they are numerous. Sometimes they even enter our station. Because of ecological concerns, we are supposed to have nothing to do with the penguins. We are not supposed to even touch them, and we stick to that. Some other photographs of the penguins. Convoys to the ice shelf are a very interesting part of an Antarctic expedition. Convoys are essential in stations which are away from the coast. Our station 3 is around 100+ kilometers away from the coast. So when the ship arrives in the summers, it leaves all the supplies in containers at the coast. And in the winter season, when the ice conditions are stable, we operate convoys up to the ice shelf, numerous convoys, around 11 or 12 or maybe more convoys to bring all those supplies over to our station. So these are some photographs of the convoy, some activities at the ice shelf where our supplies have been left off. Now here you see our snow vehicle which has broken down and is inoperational. Now it cannot be extracted until the service team arrives with the subsequent expeditions. This is what happens in a blizzard in Antarctica. The wind speed is high, as I told you, always in excess of 100 kilometers an hour with heavy snow. And if there is even a 1 millimeter gap anywhere, it just enters and it fills up the entire space. So this is what happened to a snow vehicle while it was stranded at the ice shelf. Some more activities at the station. This is our snow vehicles which are loaded with our supplies. This is that same snow vehicle after the blizzard is over. Now a blizzard essentially is a horizontal waterfall, and the snow accumulates usually on the leeward side of the obstruction. The windward side is usually hardly you see any snow accumulation. So here you see substantial snow accumulation. Now these are our oil tankers at the ice shelf, which are completely buried under ice. We will have to empty out these containers one by one and then extract these containers, these oil tankers, from the ice. This is on the ocean's surface during the peak of the winters. This ice sheet on the ocean is very thick. It is so thick that even if you land an aircraft on it, it will still hold itself. Polar night, another hallmark of any wintering stay in Antarctica. Now, our station was located at the periphery of Antarctica, so the polar night was only 2 months long. As you go further interior toward the South Pole, this polar night increases in length, and maximum is at 6 months at the South Pole. Now, during the polar night, you do not see the sun at all. It does make some efforts to rise, but it fails. But in the process, it casts some wonderful colors in the sky. And this kind of fireworks continue for a couple of hours uh, only in the daytime. These 2-3 hours are the only time when we can indulge in any kind of outdoor activity. So this is how the station looks like during the polar night. Blizzards, as I told you earlier, any enclosed space with even a small gap anywhere will lead to excessive accumulation of snow inside. Our station is constructed entirely of asbestos and wood. There is no concrete or cement or bricks used in it. Hence, small spaces are inevitable. So after a blizzard, this is what happens. Sometimes this snow enters the support systems of our station, and we have to maintain overnight vigil to maintain those systems like electric supply and the water supply. This is during the blizzard. At times, the visibility is so poor during a blizzard that you cannot even see your hand when you raise it. Aurora Australis. If anybody has been to the Arctic, you must have seen the Aurora Borealis over there. So it is a similar phenomenon. It is essentially an ionospheric activity which takes place in the polar regions of our Earth. And it is a very colorful spectacle. It is essentially streaks of, it is observed as streaks of cloud which keep on moving, and the color also keeps on modifying over time. Each of these photographs requires a lot of effort because the temperatures outside were in the region of minus 30 degrees, and each photograph used to take above 2 minutes to take. So exposing your camera for such a long time had quite an impact on its battery essentially. So it's very difficult to take photographs of the aurora. So, but it is one phenomenon which makes the wintering over completely worthwhile in Antarctica. It is an ethereal experience. In this photograph, I'll tell you two different aspects of Antarctica. One is the Russian station Ovo, which was around 4 or 5 kilometers away from our station and accessible only on foot because the route is all rocky. These were the only human beings apart from the 25 of us in our station whom we saw during our wintering period there. We had a substantial interaction with them. We visited Novo very often, and the Russians also visited us very often. The other is this date, 21st of June. It is the winter solstice, and it is celebrated as the midwinter day all over Antarctica. It is the only festival which is celebrated all over Antarctica and only in Antarctica. I have not heard of it being celebrated elsewhere, except probably in the Arctic. So it was quite a celebration. As you know, the polar night has an adverse psychological impact on whoever is staying there in the winters. So arrival of the midwinter day is a psychological boost because it signifies that half your winter is over, and now you can look forward to some warmth and some sunshine very soon. So this was our team visiting us, the Russian team. Finally, after 2 months, the sun rose exactly for 2 minutes. It came up only halfway and then it again went back. After that, the duration of sunshine increased every day very fast. And we were finally able to explore our area of Antarctica on foot. And it was quite a spectacle. The ice formations all around was spectacular. I have not been able to capture the beauty on camera as well as I wanted to. But here it is. The lakes are all frozen, so it is a fantastic time to explore the region because you can walk all over the lakes. 100 lakes, if you want to explore the region, you will have to circumvent the lakes in the summer. But in the winter, you can just walk all over them. All you need is sturdy snow boots. These ice is so thick that even the snow vehicles won't harm that ice. Some more ice formations, very interesting, very beautiful. This was an ice cave, which used to come only in the winters. During summers, it was very unstable. Nunatak. Now, the hills, Antarctica has some hills. Our region was a hilly region, but the ice accumulation is so much that all these hills are buried under ice, except uh, for its peak. All over Antarctica, all these peaks that you see will be protruding from ice, and uh, and you can, on a snow vehicle, you can go up to the peak. Here is another photograph on the lake. As I told you, you can walk all over the lakes, and it's quite an experience, although it can be very slippery if your shoes are not up to the mark. Sorry. The Dakshin Gangotri Glacier is just another average glacier which exists all around our station. But the significance is that our scientific experiments which started in 1982 were initiated in this area. So the Dakshin Gangotri Glacier has a lot of historical significance. We still conduct scientific studies in this area. Some photographs of the Dakshin Gangotri Glacier. All these exposed rock that you see have emerged from under the glacier only now. and more such rocks are emerging as the planet warms. So this is a very significant evidence of global warming. Finally, October arrives. Towards the end of October or the first week of November, we start our air connectivity into up to our station, and so our supplies start coming. Until now, the food which we had which had come to us around a year, almost a year back, and it was stored in deep freezers. We were eating only for survival. Food stored for such a long time is very planned, and it's like rubber. So anything which arrives, even an onion used to taste very heavenly. And we started exchanging all these things, fruits, vegetables. We started to exchange. They were issued to us they were rather harshened to us, and we exchanged it with something. Somebody wanted a cigarette, so we asked for some onions or some oranges or some apples in return. With the flights, Antarctica becomes a very international place. We start receiving people from all over the world. His person, Dr. Budreski, was 82 years old, and he had spent 10 winters in Antarctica, and he was still active in Antarctica. He visited our station, and it was quite a nice time we had. Christmas of 2008 was again celebrated with the Novo team. The Santa Claus had also come all the way from Russia, and we had a lovely time with them. So now, finally, after the finally tour back home, it was a long wait. Our flight was cancelled a number of times, but finally we were able to leave. Some aspects of the airport at Antarctica, it's a very unique airport. You do not need an air ticket. You do not need a passport. You do not need any ID card. You can talk to your pilot. You can enter the aircraft at will and come out at will. No security, nothing at all. So actually in Antarctica, all activities, they take place on faith, and everything is open out there. Security issues as of now, they do not exist. So only thing that they wanted is that the tickets were for 25 Indians, and 25 Indians have entered. So end of the story. They do not ask any more questions about that. Now, finally, towards the end, I'll show you some photographs of some other stations in Antarctica, which I have downloaded from the internet. I have not taken these photographs. These stations were very far away from our station and virtually inaccessible to us. The Halley station of the UK is also constructed in ice, like our Dakshin Gangotri station. But it has been constructed around 8 times. Every 4-5 years, it has to be reconstructed, and their technology improves with every construction. This is the Hovo station adjacent to our station in Machar Oasis. It is one of the oldest stations in Antarctica, established in the 1940s or 50s. The Emerson Scott station is the only station which exists in the South Pole. It's an American station. This Norwegian station is around 100 kilometers away from our station. The Vostok of Russia is another continental station, and it has the distinction of recording the lowest ever temperature on Earth, 89 degrees centigrade, somewhere in the 1980s. So with that, I end my talk, and I am open to any kind of interaction. Some questions have come already, and if I'm allowed, I'll take them one by one.
Please, Abhijit, you're most welcome to take these questions. You've already seen them on chat. Please go ahead.
Sir.
You may want to stop sharing your screen, please.
I'm wondering, okay, fine. Yeah. So the question, what does the team do in the winter months? Well, winter team has two components. One is the scientific component, and the other is the logistic component. The logistic component, the aim is to just is to maintain the station. It is a year-round station, and everything has to be maintained. So, and you cannot abandon anything, even if you want to abandon it and go back and come back when the summer season starts. You have to start from a scratch. So it's much better to stay there and maintain it. The scientific component is a very small component during the winters. And they are some members of various scientific organizations in India who stay there during the winters, and they accumulate their data like NPL, NGRI, IMD, GSI. All these people, they have to stay there in the winters. The main aim is existence. You just have to exist. Winter is not a time where you can do a lot of activities. Okay, then hearing about the circadian rhythm. Well, circadian rhythm is difficult to maintain. You have to live by your watch. Everything has to be as per time. Otherwise, it's very easy to for everything for your daily schedule to go haywire. In the summers, you see the sunlight all day, and in the winters, there is no sun. So you have to wake up at a specific time, you have to sleep at a specific time, you have to eat at a specific time. When you have your breakfast, it is dark. When you have your lunch, it is dark. When you have your dinner, obviously it is dark. So you have to live by your watch, and you have to evolve some hobbies. When we were there, we did not have any internet there. Now, of course, internet is there, but we had no internet. So you have to develop certain hobbies to keep you occupied. During the summer season, sleep was an issue. So we used to cover our windows with curtains and garbage bags and papers, etc. And some kind of an illusion of darkness used to be created. Who maintains the runway? It's an international effort. Each station, each nationality who is going to make use of that airport has been assigned a certain role. Like Indians were assigned the role of transporting oil. The Russians who were next to us were assigned the role of actually maintaining the airport, maintaining the runway. I mean, it it used to get quite uneven with the accumulation of snow. So you have to maintain it level, and you have to, and so each country had a specific role like that. I guess the expedition members have to be good at multitasking, doing work other than their specialty. Yes, it is so. It is so, and now it is increasing even more because maintaining each member in Antarctica, each individual in Antarctica is very, very expensive. So apart from most countries, it's not there in Indian stations as yet, but in most countries, each member is uh, trained in another activity, like some engineering, mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, like an electrician or a plumber or carpenter or something like that. And we all contribute to the maintenance of the station. Like we have a cook, but we have to help him out turn by turn. The housekeeping in the station, we have to do it turn by turn. How many countries have stations there? Plenty, plenty. Last time I counted, around 18 stations, 18 countries were having permanent stations there. They used to winter over in Antarctica. There are many countries who come there only during the summers, and many countries have multiple stations, like India does. India currently has 2 stations. What is the protocol for setting up of a station? Who regulates it? Well, Antarctica is under nobody. Nobody owns Antarctica. Nobody owns land in Antarctica. So you can practically go there and occupy anything and say it is mine. Like India has constructed a station. As long as you are in that station, you are considered by the government of India to be in India. When we were over there, we were informed that you are in India. The moment you come out of the station, you are out of India. So it's a very strange thing. Any country can go there and establish a station, but all activities in Antarctica are governed under the Antarctic Treaty. Antarctica has an immense history to it. And in the 50s, the Antarctic Treaty came up so that no country comes up with any claims on the continent, any part of the continent. And also it is a mineral rich continent. So under the Antarctic Treaty, only scientific expeditions and tourism is allowed. Regulated tourism is allowed. No military activities, no mineral exploration, no hunting of animals is allowed in Antarctica. So you basically, each country regulates itself, and it's a matter of, your image in the international arena for you to stick to those regulations. But if you do not, nobody can really harm you. Americans can do whatever they like. Chinese, of course, they can do whatever they like. What is the maximum length of time a person stays there continuously? Well, in the Indian expeditions, you can stay there only for a single expedition, which is around 14 months, 15 months at the most. You cannot stay there for consecutive expeditions. There are some adventurous people who opt, who want to stay there for more than one expedition, but it's not allowed. Were there any medical emergencies? Yes, we do have medical emergencies. We are 2 medical officers at our station. Infrastructure is there, but whatever emergency happens, we have to manage it over there itself. There is no help from any quarters except online help and on phone. We have to handle everything to the best of our capabilities. We had one patient who had appendicitis. Luckily, we could manage him conservatively. No operative intervention was needed, although we started to prepare the OT there, and so that was it. And I would also like to add that if there is any fatality there, the cremation has to take place in Antarctica itself. There is no way the body can be brought back. How does one get selected to the Antarctic team? Basically, these people who are eligible are from the scientific organizations who have some kind of a project ongoing in Antarctica, or if some PhD student wants to initiate some project in Antarctica, then he can submit his proposal. And the logistic team, usually they are ex-servicemen, like the electrician, the vehicle mechanics, the plumber, ex-servicemen or around military. I was on contract there. I was independent. I was not associated with any organization. So I was on contract there. Earlier expeditions were entirely operated by the armed forces, Army, Navy, and Air Force. Then slowly the armed forces opted out, and now it is entirely a civilian expedition. Are tourists allowed to go there? Yes, plenty of tourists are now going there. It's very, very expensive, but it's allowed, and people visit Antarctica in the summers. During winters, there is no tourism. What research I did? I was assigned one project by AIMS. So I was conducting a psychological study there. How far is the station from the airport? It's around 8-9 kilometers away from the airport, but it's all ice. The route is all ice, so it takes around an hour to reach the airport from our station. Any women there? Yes, women are occasionally, they do go there. Usually they are medical officers, or they come in the summer team, which is for a limited period of time, a couple of months. During winters, normally medical officers only. How do you travel from one station to the other? We do not. Most of these stations are inaccessible. They are too far away. Apart from the Russian station, all stations are above 100 kilometers, and we do not go there at all. Were you the only one taking care of the sick, or was there another task you need to do there? You have to contribute to the station maintenance activities, all the housekeeping work. We do not have any kind of labor over there. No housekeeping staff, no dedicated housekeeping staff. So you have to contribute to everything, including toilet housekeeping. Everything we have to do turn by turn. How much the cost comes for tourists? Maybe around 30 lakh to 40 lakhs. It's very expensive, very, very expensive. And when you do opt for one, an expensive one is also most safe. In Antarctica, the main issue is safety. So the tour operators which are good are also expensive. And in India, we do not have any tour operator. Most of them are Americans. So, thank you so much. Any more questions?
Okay, I think there are no more questions, Abhijit, but I would.
Last question. I asked the last question.
Sure, Ganesh has a question. So,
I asked the doctor whether he would go there again. Would he volunteer again?
I personally, I do not think I'll go there again because I personally, at a personal level, I don't have anything to achieve, any more to achieve over there. I have been there once. I've experienced it. I've seen everything. I've done everything which one can do, and it's a huge undertaking. Staying there for a year is a huge undertaking. I do not think as of today I'll go there again. Maybe after some years, my opinion might be different. Now, does the plane stay there? It cannot. The plane cannot stay there. Plane stays there only for a couple of hours, maybe 2-3 hours, and then it takes off because adverse weather conditions, if they strike, then you cannot take off from there. Can a recording of this talk? I have not recorded it.
No, this presentation is being recorded.
Okay. Which is the closest airport from the Antarctica? Is it Africa or in South America? Because most tourists go from South America. That's why I wanted.
Cape Town. If you talk about our station, Cape Town is the nearest airport. South America is very far off. It's not feasible for us. Please search for Anand Lakshmi Ratan's channel. Oh, fine. Any sort of entertainment there. We have all sorts of entertainment there. Lots of movie, music, sports. All these things are there. You have a gymnasium also there. Lots of books. If you are fond of reading, Antarctica is the place. You have all the time in the world, and you can read to your heart's content. In our library, we had some very good books.
Ladies and gentlemen, are there any more questions? No, I should think not. Okay, the recording of this presentation will be available on Anand Lakshmi Ratan's channel. You can search for Dr. Abhijit Bhatia or Anand Lakshmi Ratan, and you'll get a link on Google to the presentation. And also, I would like to invite you for our next week's presentation. I'll be sending out an invitation soon. It's a friend of mine from a city called Cucuta from Colombia, which has its border with Venezuela. And he's going to speak to us about living in a border town in South America. And it's going to be a very interesting presentation. And I hope all of you will be there and enjoy the presentation. And Dr. Abhijit, thank you so much for taking your time off and putting this presentation together for us. Thank you very much,
sir, for inviting me. Thank you, and hope to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.